Hello, we are live with Interchain Live. This is Ryan Munn from Vermont, and today I've got a special treat because we've got all local Vermont leaders in blockchain here on to join us to talk about what we've got going on up here, specifically about the Distributed Ledger Governance Association that recently launched to provide a framework and a platform to companies and partners in the blockchain space looking to work with Vermont. So I've got Jeremy, who is Executive Director, John, who is, sorry, I'm forgetting all of a sudden. What's your role again, John?
Chairman of the board.
Chairman of the board, right? And then Oliver Goodenough, who has been really leading the research on behalf of the state of Vermont for blockchain impact over the past few years and has been deeply involved in this conversation with these folks and others around the state. So thank you guys all for joining us today. I appreciate you making the time.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
So Jeremy, let's start it off with you because you are the executive director, so arguably kind of hands deepest into the day-to-day with the Distributed Ledger Governance Association. So tell me about your role there and a little bit about your background, what brought you to it.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks a lot, Ryan. So DLGA was actually created out of some work that I had with co-founding some blockchain startups out of here in San Francisco, where I currently live, and working with some of the guys in Vermont, including Oliver, including David Thelander, who's not on the call, and really understanding the opportunity in Vermont that Vermont was looking for a new captive insurance. And through my interaction with the regulators and some of the stakeholders in Vermont, Vermont seemed like a perfect jurisdiction in a lot of different ways. And the DLGA was formed really out of what we see as a necessity in the space right now, is a place where businesses, startups with great ideas can work and collaborate with the government, with other stakeholders, to actually execute and prove the technology in the wild, so to speak. And through that process, help form what should be standards, and help educate regulators and governors and the government on what rules and statutes should be changed, like with captive insurance, to really create a better jurisdiction for this nascent industry to really form, but also make the correct steps. To protect the different constituents, whether it be the shareholders, the consumers, the entrepreneurs, and lower the frictions that we're having as we try to use this technology and kind of replace or augment or improve a lot of the different areas across the whole economy and on both the public and private side. So we see DLGA is playing a central role in that hub, to help really create an ecosystem in Vermont that I think can really make an impact globally. I see my role is right now being outside of Vermont, but in Vermont somewhat, and will be more increasingly, as bringing in great ideas, great big companies to Vermont to work with my colleagues that are deep in the weeds in Vermont to bring those two groups together to really develop and exploit this landing area that we've created with the government's intergovernmental working group.
Awesome, awesome. And yeah, I want to correct myself. So that's right. You're in San Francisco, right, Jeremy?
I currently am in San Francisco.
Yes.
Yeah.
And your wife is the Vermonter, right? So you're like quasi Vermonter.
I will not attest to that. But so I went to school in Montreal. I worked a lot of my career in Wall Street. So I've been circling around the state for a while. But I will not say I'm a Vermonter, but my colleagues are Vermonters, or yes, to the lesser degrees, but are in Vermont, and I hope to move to Vermont very soon. As we just stood this up in tandem with the government's announcement. So we're early days. We just announced before the holidays, and we're hitting the ground running this year. Hope to have some good announcements in the next little while, and I expect to move out to Vermont soon.
Yes, awesome, awesome. So soon to be a Vermonter, and I think to more of my point, we talk to people all over the world on here. So the DLGA is a Vermont homegrown 501c6. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So really born and built for the blockchain initiatives in Vermont. but really set to create a platform for the world is our goal. So John, tell us a little bit about your background. You have another company up in South Burlington, is it?
Yeah, I've been an entrepreneur for many years in the tech space, doing a lot of work with cloud and managed services, and had strong interest in blockchain for many years now. And when this opportunity came up, when Jeremy and David and Oliver said they need a little bit more power here in Vermont to be able to connect with all the important stakeholders and start to discuss specific pilots and use cases, the timing was perfect. I had just sold my technology business and started a small consulting business. I do a variety of consulting projects around business development. And I said, this would be a great opportunity. And so far, I've really enjoyed it. I know a whole lot of the key players, both in government as well as private business here in Vermont, having lived here for 40 some odd years. And I was on a special committee, a government committee, assigned by the Senate to look at the IT project activity in the state government. So know a fair amount of the state government people. I'm also on the Vermont Chamber of Board and have been on for several years on their executive committee. I've been on the Vermont Manufacturers Board, and I'm also the president of the South Burlington Business Association. So I kind of bridge business, government. I've been here a long time, and I'm really enjoying working with the likes of David and Jeremy and Oliver because everybody brings diverse talents into the scene here, and it's great having Jeremy in San Francisco because he's a great bridge to a tremendous amount of blockchain activity out in the valley there.
Awesome. Yeah. So real quick, I'm just going to share. So I just pulled up the website here. You guys have kind of some initial stuff going on. Like I said, like you said, it's very recently launched. But this really outlines the mission, and people can find DLGA.org and check out get contact information and reach out to you guys if they wanted to learn more about getting involved. So so I'm going to turn over to Oliver real quick here. Oliver, you and I met, 2 years ago now, I think, in conversations around blockchain. I'm pretty sure I just called you up one day and interrupted your, between classes. And I really appreciate, you very quickly opened the door and made some introductions. I think David Thielander was actually one of the first people that you introduced me to. And as well, I believe maybe made the reference at least to the MIT folks who I've reached out to and made some great connections with and enjoyed discussing blockchain with. So Oliver, I know you've done the research with blockchain over the past 3 years leading at Vermont Law School. Share with us a little bit of sort of your take on your background and what you've gathered from that and where we're going.
Well, thanks so much. I've got a sort of complex background in that I have for many years been on the faculty at Vermont Law School, and I was for some years a co-director of the Center for Legal Innovation. I've also am a special counsel at the firm of Gravel & Shea in Burlington, and affiliated faculty at Stanford's Codex Center. So a fair number of different touch points on this subject. Over the last few years, particularly through the Vermont Law School's Center for Legal Innovation, I worked closely with some folks at the state around envisioning blockchain as a potential avenue for economic development and growth in Vermont. And our attention was both on helping homegrown Vermont initiatives and on making Vermont also attractive for folks from away as a place to bring their blockchain business. The core idea has been that blockchain is typically blockchain businesses, while imaginative and technologically interesting, have typically been underconnected to the legal structures of the world. There's been this idea that we could blockchain could transcend all of this. We didn't need legal structures. Indeed, the kind of blockchain utopian piece. And while there's some truth to that, there's only some. And there's that wonderful old song, "I fought the law and the law won." That's probably true for blockchain as well. So what we viewed was that there was an opportunity in Vermont to help provide some of the structures that would underlie blockchain activity and make it much more able to go forward in compliance with the law and indeed supported by the law. And luckily, the Vermont legislature has shared some of that vision, and other branches of government have picked up on that vision. We've seen the recent announcement of the blockchain working group in the interagency group. The legislation has been, there have been 2 or 3 bills over the last few years that have picked up on these themes and helped push things forward. So Vermont is really looking to be that kind of bridge spot between traditional legacy style law and regulation and what's going to be the way we handle things like blockchain in the future. So anyway, that's been my role, is to help on some of that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for the work on that. Thank you guys all for being here and joining us today. I really appreciate just the wealth of experience and background you guys bring to this conversation and the conversation as a whole here in Vermont. I think it's interesting because one of the key components when you ask a lot of people about what really clicked for them when they were learning about whether it was Bitcoin, they started learning about blockchain, and in many cases, not all, but many cases, there's an aspect of democratization that people find is exciting and invigorating, and sort of is a ray of light in what we see as lots of challenge in our democratic systems. You know, we've had this sort of democratic experiment going on for thousands of years now, and it's constantly evolving, and it's like maybe this is the next generation of that. So the Distributed Ledger Governance Association, and it's right in the name, we're talking about governance as opposed to necessarily government. The government has a role to play, but what we're all talking about hundreds of years ago even was governance. You know, how do we implement consensus-based systems to work with? And so DLGA, I think, is in a good position to help give a voice to the technology and to that movement that thought they would do it. Perhaps they thought they would do it without the law to begin with, but there's many that are starting to realize that it's really about being part of that dynamic process of creating the law around human needs, and then, you know, allowing systems to evolve in a way that represents those needs and the will of the participants. So that's my sort of eloquent approach to
Ryan,
it. But
I'd expand the word governance a little bit more. I've been involved with a whole lot of corporate governance issues around databases. Who governs the database? Who's responsible for what kinds of permissions and things? And it's not just around government in the formal definition. It's about who owns the data, who controls the data, and a big business can be as difficult in terms of these issues as Oliver said, as a government can be. So we're dealing with governance in a big term, not just formal government.
Absolutely, absolutely, and you touch on an aspect of security there too. You know, I've been in IT in technical positions for years, and 20 years ago it drove me nuts how users, you know, had the same password. And while, you know, we have to kind of realize there's certain, you know, human components, we also have an opportunity with this technology to put together smart systems that kind of eliminate the whole password failure problem and actually tie right to things like biometrics, and from there we can have valid governance because we know that the votes come from real individuals. So where are you guys at today? What would be, I know you just launched about a month ago. We've got the website coming up. Do you guys have any members or partners that you can discuss today currently and share with us?
We've been talking to, since actually before we officially launched, we've been talking to companies all around the country and the world. We're closing a few of our founding members and partners, depending on who comes in first. And so I imagine my goal right now is to try to close in the class of early 2019 as soon as possible, because we'd like to come to the intergovernmental working group with a good view of what pilots we're expecting to see in Vermont, and what we expect their interaction to be, and just map out the year ahead. So that's where we are right now. Most of the efforts are in doing that. I just want to mention, just because it occurred to me, I was originally focused on just Vermonters viewing, but I guess this is more global. And I mentioned captive insurance, but I thought maybe it's important to unpack that a little bit. That captive insurance was something that Vermont did in the 80s and 90s, where very similar to this, and this is somewhat of a model where the stakeholders in the state and the governor and government basically came together and created the gold standard for that industry in Vermont, and has been able to capture, if you will, the captive insurance industry in the U.S. into this state. And Vermonters know this story very well, and this is a model we'd like to do for blockchain, where we can, as a state, come together and create the right governance around it. In this case, talking more about creating the right conditions legally and regulatory, and experimenting with what those should be to create the best rules for a jurisdiction that will make domiciling and working and investing in Vermont, if you're a blockchain related company or if you have a blockchain related project, this is the place to be. Much the same as if you want to raise money as a startup in the US, you want to be jurisdictioned in Delaware for the rules and the legal history that Delaware has that makes investors much more comfortable. We'd like to make the governance in this jurisdiction in Vermont such that all stakeholders, if you're an entrepreneur or you're running a business or you have a project in blockchain, you want to be attached to the rules and you want to be bound by the rules of Vermont. And the same thing with DLGA. We want our members to be eventually held to a high standard, that we're coming together. What are these standards that in the different applications of distributed ledger that we follow, so that there's an understanding that a DLGA member is doing things the way that is understood to be the best way.
Right. Well, and considering that blockchain arguably will apply to modern corporate governance, that's really saying what we're really trying to do is kind of supplant Delaware in terms of, hey, we're thinking ahead, we're also nimble and moving quickly, and we've got a precedent of creating creative business models, because captive is one that we've really got a gold star for, if you will, but definitely the thought leadership around social benefit corporations and employee-owned cooperatives. This is not new territory for Vermont to be creative and thinking about how do we define entities and structures to fulfill the missions and really think about the true impact of these things, as opposed to just how do we design something that makes the most profit, because then that's obscuring the benefits from the real value.
And you're right on the money in terms of the culture here. And if people ask why Vermont, and the bottom line is the culture here is, let's get all the stakeholders together and dig in and break down the barriers and see what can be done in a very creative way, involving everybody in a fair and equitable manner.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm curious now, Jeremy, you probably have some good insight on some of the global companies and projects that might be interested in working with Vermont. And then, I know that Oliver has probably been taking questions from sort of the government side all along. So we've really got the trifecta here with John. You are connected with the local entrepreneurs and the real, local Vermont businesses. So. Yeah. But between the three of you guys, is there like really one kind of cherry on top kind of sector or industry or opportunity that's really standing out? Or is there kind of a balance of them that can maybe utilize the same kind of solutions going forward? Where are you kind of seeing that shake out?
Well, I would say I think everyone's biased, and I come from the energy side, and I've worked in banking. So I kind of cut my teeth as a central banker, and then work on FX desk, and then was working on trading, commodity trading desks. So I kind of like the fintech side, and I like the energy side. In fact, I was working with a few big energy projects, renewable energy projects, and a new technology to lower the cost and the emissions of energy. And so I see Vermont as a good testing ground for some of the energy technologies that how blockchain can be used as a transactional tool to create a market pricing for energy, electrons, where you can get the benefits of more transparent markets, both in incentivizing new production, so new renewable generation, and also conserving better use of the energy that you have. And that can be done with blockchain. There's companies that we're talking with that. And then just generally, coming from Wall Street and coming from central banking, there's real opportunity for change in finance, banking, that whole, the fintech general side. And I think we can create the conditions where where the state can change rules or can make things more comfortable for certain aspects of it, whether it be the trustee company, whether it be a banking license, how we engage, the rules around ownership and custodianship. These can all kind of be worked out at the state level, where we can create, because all these companies that are working, unless you're Bitcoin, all these companies that are working in payments have to be jurisdiction somewhere. They have to be under some law, and the different stakeholders want them to be under some law, and that's very important. So to be in Malta or to be somewhere else, but to be in the U.S. is really is very reassuring to a lot of companies and consumers, not just in the U.S. but globally. But then that have to be in some state in the U.S. And why not Vermont? And I think John says we can make that ecosystem and that jurisdiction in Vermont.
Absolutely.
I would add, as the second sector I'm excited about is certainly supply chain, and particular for the food industry. Vermont's got a long tradition of high quality, organic, excellent food, and we want to continue that reputation. And I think applying blockchain to the supply chain to assure that quality and that chain of custody throughout all the activities related to food are big, and it's just a huge growth industry here.
Awesome.
And if I may chime in, we've already seen some very successful pilots being run here in property recordation. Some folks have been doing that and getting some good notice for that, and getting some good cooperation from our local government. In addition to the state level, I think we should mention that the possibility of working with local governments on some of these things, particularly those with a government connection. Many of the companies that are looking to go into this are trying to figure out how to work with people on initial pilots and how to scale things up. And so far, the Vermont municipalities have also been very open to working with folks, and we would hope to see that going forward.
Yeah, I like to cite when I'm sharing people one of the benefits of Vermont. I actually cite the fact that we still have town meetings all over Vermont. That's something. There's certain things that Vermont has preserved, arguably in stubbornness at times, but to potentially our benefit, in that we've preserved some of the sort of original founding father sort of vision of democracy and the empowerment of the people through the towns and the municipality structure. And now we have this opportunity with this kind of virtual municipality structure that's in Vermont as well. And then combining that with the blockchain LLC, it's a great door opener for very powerful public-private partnerships, in my opinion. And so I love to cite that sort of little bit of history in Vermont that really is supporting the future right now.
And we're just using technology. Sorry, Oliver. We're just using technology to keep things peer-to-peer, if you will. So there's certain things that you can get away from because they're tiresome, they're burdensome, they're not necessarily adding to your life. Technology can help replace some of these, but some of these things, like meeting together with other people, are essential for a good society. And I think blockchain can actually allow us to use our time for more of those things and less of the other.
Absolutely. Oliver, what were you going to say as well?
I was just going to say there are also other players in the civics sector here that are helpful. There are a number of incubator spaces working and opening up in Vermont that we've been able to collaborate with around some of the blockchain issues. So you've got the government, you've got the private sector of companies, you've got the places like the incubator spaces and all that kind of thing. We're at a scale here in Vermont, as you well know, where we can productively coordinate across a number of areas. It's a couple of meetings, a couple of phone calls, and you can start things going. We're at a scale where that's possible, and that isn't the case everywhere.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's lots of exciting things, again, that aren't directly related to blockchain that sort of will be in the future, in my view. When we look at all these craft food providers and the farmers markets that are everywhere. There's the local economies movements. There's a state banking. There's people talking about state public banking and really thinking about these things in new ways. And we're caught, right? We're between, we've got Boston over on one side, we've got New York over there pretty close, we've got Montreal up above. So we've got these major sort of metro or urban powerhouses, especially in finance and in fintech now. And so we're like extra motivated to make sure that we hold our own and stand on our own here. And that's an opportunity for really any technology that's disruptive to really make a stand and be able to, assuming they're doing good things, right? I mean, I think that's the other thing that's interesting about Vermont is while we do have a small platform that we can work with very easily, people will call, baloney, if you will, pretty quickly as well. And but it's an open dialogue as opposed to some of the name calling that happens in other places.
You're right on the money in terms of we're so close to these population centers, and they so want to do some pilot, but they want to do it in a small, manageable way, and understand from their issues to improve and tinker with it. There was one group out of Toronto that we've been talking to, and they were looking at perhaps doing a pilot in a country in Africa or maybe in the Caribbean. And then they heard about Vermont, came on over and said, wow, this is so much closer to Toronto. And won't it be easy to do our pilot over here? So we're in great discussions with them. And so folks are excited to find a place that's manageable and close to their business to be able to run pilots.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, so does anybody have kind of a vision that they want to share? I mean, where do you think we might see things going in, 2-3 years, or where do you see sort of DLGA evolving to in the next few years?
Well, as I was saying, we're focused on bringing projects into Vermont and creating an ecosystem. And I think success breeds more success. And I think there's incredible benefits that will come from as you do more and more projects. The local Vermonters who are already, a lot of them have already had some experience working with some pilots, get more and more comfortable with the technology, and that will create more and more the ease of which and lower frictions and more comfort around doing more and more projects. So I see that as the near-term goal is that we'll get we'll pick some areas that we kind of specialize in because those are the projects that we're doing, and we'll broaden that out. But I think DLGA itself will play an instrumental role in helping guide the rules of our members through our members and with the experience of our members, and help guide what they need from the government. And through that process, I would like the DLGA to effectively become kind of an SRO, if you will, where our members are kind of partly the reason why they want to join the DLGA is for the governance, is for the standards that they are part of creating and being held accountable to.
And SRO is self-regulating organization, right?
Correct.
Yeah, awesome. And what about, I guess maybe this would be a good question for you, John, as you've been an entrepreneur in Vermont. I mean, what kind of barriers or challenges do you see for blockchain or for DLGA going forward? I mean, we've got a great place, but there's always challenges.
I guess one of the challenges is just in general, resources are always tight. Vermont runs lean and mean, and helping people to find the resource to do the changes, to do the piloting and have all of that complicated discussion can be difficult on occasion. So, bringing it down to a small town, bringing it down into a smaller business can be a challenge compared to the larger businesses or larger towns. And that's always been an issue. I think Vermont also likes to keep it local as much as possible. And this is going to really open up a lot globally for Vermont, which is fine. I think many people are ready for it, but some may find it a little culture shock to be working with people around the world on these kinds of projects. I personally think it's very healthy, but there may be some businesses that find that a little different than their usual course of business.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I've seen. I remember getting hired for a job once, and probably within 6 weeks, the general manager that hired me had left because we had a cold snap in August, and he went, "What's winter going to be like? I'm out of here." So, but he's still a good guy, and I talked to him. He's in a warmer state.
Yeah.
So now, Oliver, you've definitely got, I think, a little bit more of the legal insight. So, what would be maybe some existing challenges, not just in Vermont, but across the states? What kind of things, legal or legislatively, do we still need to be thinking about or addressing in order to not trip ourselves up? I won't cite any particular states, but there's been some states that have put up some regulation that's been particularly damaging, I think. And I think Vermont's done a really good job of avoiding that kind of language. But there's certainly challenges ahead in terms of how do we approach the regulators, how do we approach the legislation, and how do we make sure that the doors are opening in the right way?
Well, I would point out again the fact that there has been the formation of this interagency working group, convened initially by our Attorney General T.J. Donovan, who has certainly provided some intellectual leadership around this. But the other governmental departments are there as well. Our departments, the financial regulatory folks have been very open to hearing about all this. They obviously have the public good firmly in view and are not going to make rash kinds of moves, but they've been refreshingly open to hearing where this is all headed. I'd say a couple of things. One is that the classic regulatory structures that we see around things like finance, but also into things like food and ag, all of that end of things, have grown up in a world where you had paper as the principal means of governance. You throw in telephone and some other things. We have moved forward, but what blockchain and its related technologies are opening up is both a whole new way of doing business and a whole new way of regulating that business. And what we will see, I think, over the next 10 to 15 years is a process where government actually comes to grips with that and makes the kinds of changes that will intelligently protect the public good in that environment. Trying to protect the public good with respect to blockchain using the rules for the 1930s, it's just not a fit. It's just not a fit. So even with the best intention, you need to have some development. You'll see that in money. You'll see that in finance. That's where a lot of the attention is going now. But I think that there's also a little bit of a smoke screen. There's many other areas where blockchain will have an impact and where that will go forward. The one other thing I'd like to mention, though, is where there's really, I think, room for engagement is on the law of tokenization. That so much of blockchain, particularly the coin, but many related developments have had this notion of tokenizing, of representing in a blockchain tradable token things in the real world. So we've tokenized you can tokenize airplane miles. Some people are doing that. You can tokenize real estate. You can tokenize food stuff.
Well, and I would posit, what is a piece of paper that represents debt or a stock or the title to your car, but a token of that ownership?
Exactly. We had paper tokens. It's not like this is a brand new thing. Your car title is a token for your car, and you trade it by signing it over. But moving that into a digital milieu is only partly theorized at this point. And if you end up applying, as I say, the rules for paper-based checks and car titles to blockchain-based tokenization, it's going to be a huge misfit. So again, this is something I think, again, Vermont could perhaps take a lead on, and if we can end up with a truly useful tokenization law that people from around the world could elect to be governed by, that's one of the kinds of opportunities that sits out there for us as we think the next stages and all.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I want to keep this, I don't want to go too long because I know we could probably all talk for hours about this stuff, but I wanted to really get this idea and the DLGA exposed to our audience and anyone that comes along checking out what's going on here in Vermont. So I really appreciate you guys joining us today and the hard work that you're doing to make this platform available to people that want to do business and move forward with blockchain. So thank you all for your work and being here.
Well, I'll make one more plug before we end here. Anybody on the call that wants to join the DLGA, as a matter of fact, Oliver has just written a very interesting white paper that will be available to members around the topic of sandboxing. And, you know, we continue to want to offer thought leadership in this area to members. So certainly feel free to reach out to Jeremy or me, and we can sign you up as either a member of the DLGA, or we also have the other classification is partners. You know, people like banks and lawyers and accountants that are going to help the ecosystem in that regard.
Absolutely. And that's dlga.org. And just to wrap it up, I did want to direct people to really spend a little bit of time on the website to, you know, get a good sense of what that is. And yeah, reach out to you guys directly. The phone number's on there. And certainly if anybody wants to talk shop with myself and connect with you guys, they can do that as well. And there's lots more coming up in this next quarter or two in Vermont. So it'll be pretty exciting to keep tabs on it all.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you guys again. Thank you to the audience for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks in return, Ryan. Take care.
Awesome. Take care, everybody.